I'm Nupur Chawla, teaching English literature at Maitri College, Delhi University. Today's lecture is titled Oliver Goldsmith and the English Essay, and it is part of the ongoing series on the English essay. So you see, in the previous lectures, we have been taking up different essayists from different periods of time, and discussing that how these different writers contributed to the development of the genre. Primarily, it's during the 18th century that this style of writing flourished, and we understood that how it was a seminal form of expression for social critique, and also it was along with that it also served the purpose of entertainment for the people, because the style of writing adopted by the essayists involved the use of wit immensely, and it is through the use of wit that all these the follies of people of the time were highlighted, and the gaps in the value system, they would be made fun of, and primarily the kind of social trends and patterns and value systems, all of them they would come under scanner in the English essay. So one can say then that while on the one hand it had this kind of a corrective intent, while at the same time it was equally a genre that was given to the idea of entertainment for the sake, and where people and their values and their actions were brought into close scrutiny and discussion. Right. So broadly, that's what we understand as the genre of the English essay, because in every lecture we discuss that how the word essay has multiple interpretations, but the form in which we use it, or the meaning in which we use it, is to highlight the actual genre that exists in English literary writing. So today we are going to discuss this very seminal 18th century author, poet that most of you would have heard of, that is Oliver Goldsmith. He was born in 1728 and lived not a very long life. He died in his mid-40s, and so he died in 1774. So he was an Anglo-Irish playwright, poet, novelist, who also wrote essays in the beginning of his literary career. So I know that most of us have been familiar with Goldsmith's poems, and for that matter that very famous novel by him as well, that is the Vicar of Wakefield. But at the beginning of his career, he also wrote literary essays, right? Sorry, not literary essays, but he brought out a periodical, right? So if we just look at the trajectory of this author, you see he came from a humble background and made a living by writing and publishing. And the initial course of his life was kind of checkered. It wasn't straight, as he went to Edinburgh to study medicine first. Then he went to Leiden to continue his studies, and then to Flanders in France, Switzerland, and finally to northern Italy. So you see, all these places he travelled for various purposes, only to return to England, Britain in 1756, which is the middle of the 18th century, right? So before that, he frequented all these places for the sake of studies, and sometimes even for the sake of his literary work as well, right? But it was primarily, if we look at the time that he really entered into a literary production in the way as we know it popularly, was around the year 1759, right? That is when he commenced the weekly publication of The Bee, which is which is a periodical, in which he adapted the stylistic techniques of earlier periodical essayists, drawing on apology, gentle wit, irony, and moral earnestness, right? So as I was discussing just a while ago, that these were some of the defining features of all these periodicals, the use of gentle wit, the use of irony, and also moral earnestness, right? So he also, kind of adapted. Now you see, if you very carefully notice, we are saying that he adapted these techniques. So which means what? That he did not entirely follow them to the T. Yes. So he used them. He understood them closely, but again he gave all these forms of expression his own bent, his own unique treatment. So when we look at the periodical, the B, very carefully, we see that what exactly did Oliver Goldsmith bring to this particular form of expression, right? Now, one of the things that is also popularly understood is that with the publication of his periodical essays, he gained considerable popularity. So that's the time that he actually took off as a literary figure, and this also gained him the support of Samuel Johnson, who welcomed him into his club of prominent cultural figures. And as people interested in literature, we all know about Samuel Johnson. He is one of the seminal names in 18th century writing. Yes, so it is this periodical then that brought Goldsmith in close proximity to Samuel Johnson, right? So as I mentioned in the beginning, that while Goldsmith's reputation was made with his periodical work in 1759, he later went on to produce various other seminal works as well. For example, he wrote two long poems titled The Traveller in 1764 and The Deserted Village in 1770. Now, for those of you who are studying literature at your undergraduate level, you would have read The Deserted Village, that being one of the very popular poems by Goldsmith. And then he also wrote two comic plays, The Good Natured Shepherd and She Stoops to Conquer. Now, you see, if you also prepare for your competitive examinations, and you study history of English literature, so this play, She Stoops to Conquer, is considered to be one of the seminal plays of 18th century, and it was authored by none other than Oliver Goldsmith. So it was written in 1773. And of course, the other oft mentioned text in connection with Goldsmith is the novel The Vicar of Wakefield, which was written in 1776. And this actually appealed to the sensibilities of the dawning Romantic era. So what we also say is that at the cusp of the 18th century, we saw that the literary periods were shifting from the Enlightenment, from the age of Enlightenment, to the Romantic era. So during literary Romanticism, it was characterized by very specific attitudes and concepts that took over art and expression. That is, imagination took center stage, secular values came to the fore, humanism became important, and various other developments which are associated with Romanticism. We could see the seeds of these in the novel written by Goldsmith in 1766. So that's how seminal this particular work of fiction was by the author. Now, of course, this was just to give you the background of the author that we are discussing today, right? That how he had experimented, he had he had been writing in all these different genres along with the periodicals. So you see now, when we talk of Goldsmith, the periodical is not mentioned very often. So that's the reason that we are bringing that into discussion now, that which is not very often discussed about the author. So now on your screens you see that's what Oliver Goldsmith looks like. Born in 1728 and was around till 1774. Now, with this little, backdrop of the author, let us look at, some excerpts from the introduction to the periodical The Bee. Okay, it was called The Bee, Being Essays on the Most Interesting Subjects. Now, if you look at the title of the periodical itself, Being Essays on the Most Interesting Subjects. So, which means what? That, the author Goldsmith picked up certain topics for discussion, certain subjects that he took up, and he used these periodicals to think about them, and of course also write about them, right? And also look at the word being essays. So maybe this gives us a sense that there would be a philosophical bent to his treatment of this genre as well, right? So with that, let's look at a few excerpts from the introduction of this periodical, so that we get a sense that what is it that the author had in mind, and what are the kinds of what is the attitude and the approach that he had in mind while bringing out the periodical, right? So the opening sentence of the introduction of the periodical says, and I quote, "There is not perhaps a more whimsically dismal figure in nature than a man of real modesty who assumes an air of impudence." Impudence means, that somebody who, impudence means the attribute that you show that you do not care enough about some things, right? And modesty means somebody who's actually grounded and very humble, right? So he says that there is not perhaps a more whimsically dismal figure, sad figure in nature than a man of real modesty or humility who assumes an air of impudence, who means who tries to appear as if he does not care, but within, inside, he's actually very modest. So he says that there is no more sad a figure than such a person. So who, while his heart beats with anxiety, studies ease, right? He might have a lot of anxiety inside of him, but outside he appears at ease. And affects good humor means he tries to put on, a kind of a semblance of good humor, while inside he is full of fear and anxiety. He says, in this situation, however, a periodical writer often finds himself upon his first attempt to address the public in form, unquote. So you see, right at the outset, Goldsmith is establishing his state of mind. And he says that the very first time when a writer attempts to address the public, that's the state of mind. Anxious, inside he has a lot of conflicting thoughts, but on the outside he appears, he assumes an air of impudence, right? So quite a, I would say, a very honest and a very straightforward beginning, right? Directly the author connects with the reader by sharing the predicament of an essayist, and automatically the reader starts to imagine what would Goldsmith's own thoughts also would be as an essayist addressing the public for the very first time, right? Now let's look at the second quote from the introduction. It says, and I quote, "I intended to pursue no fixed method, so it was impossible to form any regular plan. Determined never to be tedious in order to be logical, wherever pleasure presented, I was resolved to follow," unquote. So here, what does he say? Here he is talking about, in the introduction, what is his purpose of writing the periodical, bringing out the periodical, and what methods he follows. And he says that there's no fixed method. He very clearly makes that statement. And he says that also there is impossible, it is impossible to form any regular plan. And therefore he says that I was determined never to be tedious in order to be logical. I never hankered after logic. So what I was driven by was just pleasure or whim, right? That is what I was following. Whatever seemed intuitively right to talk about, I presented that in my periodical, right? And now even why did he call his periodical the bee will become clear in this next quote, where he says, like the bee which I had taken for the title of my paper, I would rove from flower to flower with seeming inattention but concealed choice, expatiate over all the beauties of the season and make my industry my amusement, unquote. Now this is a very loaded statement that he is making. So he says that just like a bee, I would rove from flower to flower. Now this brings a question to mind, that what flower is he talking about? Here, of course, flower is symbolic of different topics, different concepts, different issues, that different thoughts that he would want to talk about through his periodicals. So he says, like a bee, I would go from one flower to the other with seeming inattention. Now look at the words very carefully, seeming inattention. So it is an inattention which is seeming. It means that it appears that he hasn't put a lot of thought. But what lies behind it? He says, but concealed choice. But behind that seeming inattention, behind that seeming indifference and very easy manner is a concealed choice, a choice which is hidden. So which means what? That he is not writing this periodical just completely out of whim, as he might say, or as it might appear, but he says that there was a very conscious choice behind everything that he said, right? Expatiate over all the beauties of the season and make my industry my amusement. My industry meaning his capabilities to write, to think and write. He says that this is what I drew my amusement from, or I made it a source of entertainment. Now you see, it's beautifully puts together Goldsmith's approach to the periodical. It appears effortless, it appears to be very breezy, appears to be intuitive, appears to talk about those issues that might come to one person naturally. Has an air of also amusement, but behind it, underneath it, is a very conscious choice that he was making, right? So very beautifully and subtly he conveys his intention in creating this periodical, right? And then he goes on to say that this much, however, he may be assured of, that neither war nor scandal shall make any part of it, unquote. Then towards the end of the introduction, he makes it very clear that one thing my reader can be assured of, that neither war nor scandal will be a part of the periodical. Again, for those of you who are familiar with this form of expression, we all know that how scandal was a very, very, I would say, quintessential part of the English essay, where the essayists would observe closely the personal lives of a lot of people, and they would talk about them, of course, sometimes by naming, and most times without naming them. But what was the purpose of talking about these scandals, or observing them carefully and bringing them out in the periodical? The purpose was to highlight the values that needed to be corrected, the aspects of human behavior that needed to be corrected, and of course for a bit of diversion as well, right? So these were the reasons that the periodicals talked about scandals. But Goldsmith says here what? That my reader should not expect any reference to either the war or the scandals. War, which means concerns of political significance. He says all of these themes you will not find in my periodical, The Bee. So you see, when we notice these excerpts from the introduction to the periodical very carefully, what do we observe? We see that how Goldsmith followed the form of the English essay, but at the same time he also invents, or let's say reinvents, the genre in his own way, adding his own flavor to this style of writing. So he brought it out in order to talk about certain issues that concerned mankind, humankind. That is just like all other essays. He did have an eye on society while writing. That also is a point where he coincides with the other periodicals that went before him. But one place where he departs from the existing trend is that he would not talk about scandals. He would talk about those issues that would come intuitively to him and which appear to be very, very natural and organic and for the sake of amusement, but behind them had a very carefully considered choice that drove those issues which he brings up in these in the periodical, right? So in this lecture we have looked at Goldsmith as a literary figure. We discussed his early life, what are the different poems, novels and other genres and other seminal works that he wrote, and we discussed how the periodical The Bee that he established in the year 1759 marked the beginning of his literary career. And with these little excerpts from the introduction of the periodical, we understood what are the themes that he has in mind for these essays, what is the approach that he has, and also at the same time what form would he adopt while discussing the different ideas that he intends to in this particular periodical. So in the next part of the lecture, we will take up excerpts from one essay of the periodical and understand further Goldsmith as an English essayist. Thank you.